Hi, my name is Tom Heffel, and this channel is all about helping students learn chemistry. In today's video, we're going to be talking about balancing chemical equations. And to be able to write these balanced chemical equations, there's 5 simple steps that we need to follow. Okay, the first step is to be writing our atomic symbols and actually writing our formulas correctly. Okay, and when we do that, we got to check for elements being diatomic, and we also have to check to make sure that the compounds are written correctly. So really, steps 2 and 3 need to be done before steps 4 and 5. And what students tend to do is mix these together. So let's get right into it. There's some notes here at the bottom that we're going to come back into the middle of the video. Right now, we're just focusing on how to write these balanced chemical equations. So on the next page, I have some examples of some problems that I'd like to do with you. Okay. So the first two, I'm going to kind of work with you guys, and then the ones after that, I'd like you guys to kind of like pause the video and try to work on them on your own. Okay, so the first step to writing good balanced equations is just being able to write down the appropriate atomic symbols. Okay, so I'm going to write down the atomic symbols for aluminum and chlorine. Okay, and it says react to form. Okay, that's going to be your arrow. That's your action verb or action word or your verb. Okay, and sometimes it's reacts, sometimes it's to yield, to make, to produce. All of these would be your action word or your verb. Okay, and that's typically where the change is occurring, and that's where you're going to draw your arrow signifying a change is occurring. And that's going to form some aluminum chloride. So, like I said, my first step is just to write down the symbols for aluminum and chlorine before moving on to the next step, which is taking a look at your compounds. Okay. Now, if they're covalent, okay, you're going to see some prefixes. And in this problem, I don't see any prefixes. So none of the compounds are covalent. They're probably going to be ionic. So I have to check their charges. The only compound that I have right here is aluminum chloride. And when I check their charges, aluminum's a +3 and chlorine's a -1. So this formula is going to be AlCl3. If you don't know how to do this, I have a video on how to write formulas, and being able to balance chemical equations starts with the concept of writing formulas. So if you need to go back and watch that video series, there's a series of 4 that starts easy at level 1 and goes all the way up to difficult to level 4. You need to go back and watch those videos and then come back to this particular video. That would make a lot of sense. Okay, so after I've checked my compounds to see if they're written correctly, I'm going to check my elements for being diatomic. Aluminum is not diatomic, but chlorine is diatomic. So I'm going to place a little 2 there. Okay, so now that I got my atomic symbols written correctly, I write my formulas for my compounds correctly, I check for my elements for being diatomic, I now can count my atoms. And the way I count my atoms, I'm going to simply underneath the arrow put the different atoms that I have. I have aluminum and chlorine, and I'm going to start counting them on the left and the right. Okay. For the aluminum, I got 1 on this side, and I have 1 on this side. There's no subscript there, so it's a 1. For the chlorines, there's 2 on the left-hand side, but 3 on the right-hand side. So as you can see, the chlorines are not balanced. Okay. When I get to this point, as a reminder, I can only use coefficients to balance the chemical equations. Okay. So after I count my atoms, it says use coefficients to balance the equations. I can't use the subscripts anymore because the subscripts were used for formula writing. So remember, subscripts are for formula writing, and then to make the left and right hand side of the arrow equal is when we use coefficients. And those are going to be the big numbers that we're going to place here. Okay, now I see this 2-to-3 ratio. So what I'm thinking here is that I need to place a 3 right here. Okay, and that will give me 6. And if I place a 2 right here, that will give me 6 chlorines as well. But it also gives me 2 aluminums. Okay, and that's okay. Okay, now I'll tell you, a big mistake that students do is they want to put a coefficient in the middle of the compound, and you're not allowed to do that. Okay, so all the coefficients will go in the beginning of each of the chemicals. So when I place that 2 there, yes, it did mess up the aluminums, but it did get my chlorines to 6. And if I want to come back to the other side and place a 2 right here, that will get my aluminums up to 2. And so each side, the aluminums are balanced, and each side, the chlorines are balanced. And this is a balanced chemical equation. Let's try another one together. Let's take a look at sodium phosphate and calcium sulfate. Okay, now these are polyatomic ions because they end with ATE. And the first step is just to get my symbols down. So you have to have your polyatomic ions memorized in order to do this first step. Okay, so sodium is Na and phosphate is PO4. And calcium sulfate. Calcium is Ca and sulfate is SO4. And that's going to react to form, so that's my action word. That's where the change is occurring. That's going to make sodium sulfate, sodium being Na, sulfate being SO4, and then calcium phosphate, calcium phosphate. So all I did is write down the symbols, okay? Next step is to check the compounds are written correctly, and this is your formula writing. Like I said, I do have videos on this if this is too fast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to check the charges, +1, -3. So the correct formula is going to be Na3PO4. If that was too fast, please go back and watch those videos. +2, -2, that works out. +1, -2, there's going to be a 2 there. +2, -3. We're going to put a 3 right here, and then in parentheses with a 2 right here. Okay, so that's me checking my formulas for my compounds to make sure that they're written correctly by checking the charges because all of these are ionic. Check elements to see if they're diatomic. Okay, all these are compounds. There's no elements here to check to see if they're diatomic. And now I'm ready to count the atoms. Now, here's some words of advice, okay? When you see an element like oxygen pop up in every single one of those compounds, okay, you can balance those elements last. I wouldn't even count them at the very beginning, okay? So I'm going to talk about the different elements. We got some sodium here. We got some phosphorus. Don't really care about the oxygen since it shows up everywhere. Then calcium, then sulfur, and then we'll worry about the oxygen at the end. So let's go ahead and count the atoms on both sides. I got 3 over here and 2 over here. For phosphorus, I have 1. And over here, this 2 multiplies everything inside the parentheses, so it's 2. And then I have, for the calcium, I have 1 and 3. And for the sulfur, I have 1 and 1. Okay. Like I said, I'm not going to worry about the oxygen because it shows up in all these places. I will count it at the very end. Okay. But while I'm changing things, I'm just going to wait to the very end to worry about the oxygens. So now the only place I can put numbers is where I put those underscores, okay, because we're going to use coefficients to balance the equation. So subscripts here, when we're writing the compounds formulas, okay, coefficients here when we're trying to balance the chemical equation. When we try to balance this out, let's take a 3:2 ratio. The number 6 should be popping in your head. So how do I get 6 over here? If I place a 2 there, that's going to change the sodium to 6, but it's also going to change the phosphorus to 2. And check that out. Oh, that looks like it's going to be a good thing because that's actually balancing out. When we take a look at the calciums, okay, we got 3:1. So if I wanted 3, put 3 calciums here. And it also gave me 3 sulfurs. Oh, that messed the sulfurs up, okay? So right now, everything balances out except the sulfurs. So I'm going to look where sulfur's at, and I'm going to place a 3 there. And when I do that, that messes up the sodium. Oh, look, those sodiums weren't balanced, okay? Now they are. And that 3 also balances the sulfur out. So 6, 2, 3, 3, 6, 2, 3, 3. This thing's probably going to be balanced, but I do have to check my oxygens, okay? So 2 times 4 is 8 from that compound, plus 3 times 4 is 12 from this compound. So there's a total of 20 from this side, okay? Check the other side. 3 times 4 over here is 12, plus the 2 times the 4, because this multiplies everything inside the parentheses. So that's going to be 20 as well. So everything kind of works out here really, really well. Okay, so just a quick lesson on how to balance chemical equations. I hope that has helped. Okay, in the next video, we're going to practice these problems. Okay, with some of these vocabulary words, and those will that will come in the next video.